This is near the top of the list. It has been 10 years since Sade, who sold more records than any other female artist in British history, toured North America. But guess what? She is back.
She didn't just walk away from fame. She transformed in its absence. While others chased relevance, Sade Adu chose stillness, trading sold-out arenas for solitude and public praise for personal peace. At 66, what stuns the world isn't how she looks, but how she's evolved, radiating a deeper kind of beauty shaped by resilience, not routine.
I just felt ready, and I think that the album deserved it, and it's like a sort of journey, historical journey.
The voice remains unmistakable, but the woman? She's rewritten the rules entirely. But what exactly happened during those quiet years that changed her so profoundly? Stay with us. This is where it all unfolds. Sade Adu's quiet triumph. Her voice once filled sold-out arenas, yet in the years that followed, it was silence that told her truest story. While the world wondered why Sade Adu stepped away from the spotlight, those closest to her knew she was never chasing applause to begin with. What looked like absence was, in truth, a conscious retreat. After years of legal battles, public speculation, and personal trials, Sade chose not to explain herself, but to protect the one thing more precious than fame: her peace. Behind the soft glow of her timeless music was a life punctuated by quiet strength. After her last major release, Soldier of Love, in 2010, many expected a full comeback: interviews, tours, and press cycles, but none came. Instead, Sade vanished from the industry's rhythm and tuned into her own. No rebranding, no farewell statements, just a simple declaration: I live on my own time. That wasn't a slogan. It was a promise to herself. Much of that time was spent in Gloucestershire, where she restored an old farmhouse and embraced a life far from headlines. No red carpets, no flashing cameras, just Sade, her partner Ian Watts, a former Royal Marine, her dog, and her mother Annie. In one rare public moment captured in 2020, she was seen walking through misty fields with her family, far removed from the stage lights she once stood beneath. It wasn't a performance. It was presence, real, quiet, and complete. But Sade's story is not just about retreat. It's about resilience. While the public clung to her polished image and velvet voice, few saw the woman facing legal storms, guarding her creativity from exploitation, and more profoundly, protecting her son, Isaac. When Isaac came out as transgender in 2016, Sade didn't post statements or schedule interviews. She simply stood by him, quietly and fully. She held his hand through doctor visits, wiped his tears, and whispered strength when the world felt heavy. Her silence wasn't absence, it was action. In a heartfelt letter, Isaac once called her his greatest support, not just in transition, but in life. While the world speculated on why she disappeared, Sade was crafting something far more meaningful than a hit album. She was building a life where her son could grow, not under a spotlight, but under the shelter of a mother's unwavering love. To walk away from fame when the world still demands your presence is not weakness, it's power. And to use that silence not as a shield, but as a tool for healing, that's a legacy. For Sade, music was never about relevance. It was always about truth. And sometimes, the greatest truth doesn't echo from a stage, but from a home filled with quiet love, slow healing, and unshakable strength. But what did young Sade long for before the fame and farmland? Stay glued to your screen to uncover her quiet beginnings. A voice forged in silence. Sade Adu's story didn't begin in the spotlight or acclaim. It began in the soft, unspoken spaces of loneliness. Born Helen Sade Adu in Ibadan, Nigeria, her early childhood was filled with sunlit memories and gentle rhythms. But when her parents separated at the age of 4, everything changed. Her mother brought her and her brother to England, a new world that felt colder in more ways than one. Essex was no homecoming. The skies were gray, the streets unfamiliar, and the people around her couldn't quite understand the quiet, soft-spoken girl with the unfamiliar name and skin a few shades darker. She became the outsider almost overnight. Her identity caught between two worlds, never fully British, no longer fully Nigerian. Her classmates stumbled over her name. She learned early how to disappear in plain sight. And so, she did. She blended in, not with noise, but with silence. But that silence didn't break her. It shaped her. Between the cold classrooms and long afternoons sketching in her notebook, something deeper was taking root. Her voice, one that would later hold entire stadiums in awe, began as a quiet whisper in her own head, a product of longing, of questions left unanswered. Her music would later be known for its restraint, its aching beauty, its depth. But all of that came from here, from the isolation of a childhood that demanded survival without explanation. She didn't learn to sing to be noticed. She sang to soothe a loneliness that words couldn't explain. And that's why, when she finally stepped onto a stage, every note held something rare: memory, yearning, and the unmistakable sound of a soul still searching for home. But what quiet pain shaped Sade's voice long before the spotlight found her? Stay glued to your screen to find out. The rise and bruise of Sade Adu. After art school in London, Sade drifted between modeling gigs and textile sketching, floating through creative circles that admired her beauty more than her ideas. Her elegance was clear, but the world wasn't listening yet. That changed the day she stepped onto a small pub stage as a backing vocalist for Pride, a modest funk band hustling for gigs in smoke-filled rooms. At first, she blended in. No solos, no spotlight, just a presence that lingered. But even in the background, something stirred. Her voice, low, steady, emotionally grounded, didn't scream for attention. It drew it in, quietly but irresistibly. It was during one of these unassuming nights that everything shifted. A slow, sultry melody called "Smooth Operator" slipped from her lips during an impromptu set. And suddenly, the room went still. Conversations froze. Instruments paused mid-chord. Even the air seemed to lean closer. What had been just another bar performance became a moment people wouldn't forget. That whisper of a song didn't need pyrotechnics. It needed only her truth. And in that breathy delivery, she proved that silence could be as powerful as sound. Soon after, Sade's quiet strength would turn into a global phenomenon. When Diamond Life dropped in 1984, the world finally caught on. The album didn't just sell, it soared. With platinum plaques and a Grammy in hand, she seemed to be the industry's newest crown jewel. But with fame came a storm she didn't ask for. Instead of honoring her artistry, the British press weaponized her privacy. They called her icy, distant, a cold diva. Her grace, once praised, was twisted into detachment. Her refusal to play into scandal became suspicion. Week after week, headlines made claims that weren't just false, they were deeply cruel. Gossip suggested secret children, hidden fortunes, and outlandish spending. No evidence, just rumor disguised as truth. While she remained silent, The media filled the gaps with stories of their own invention. She wasn't elusive. She was protective. She didn't vanish. She chose peace. But the more she guarded herself, the more they questioned her authenticity. Her voice, which had once calmed rooms and crossed borders, now had to compete with tabloids' screaming caricatures. Even her rare interviews were spun, twisted into sound bites that didn't resemble her at all. As she once said, "I came to think that those tape machines would just scramble what you say like a liquidizer." It wasn't cynicism, it was heartbreak. In America, she still found understanding. Her audience listened with empathy. But in the UK, the country that had birthed her career, trust had fractured. She wasn't just Sade, the singer. She became a symbol of mystery, of misjudgment, of what happens when a woman refuses to make herself available for public consumption. Behind the applause, behind the Grammy, stood a woman quietly retreating, wounded not by critics of her music, but by those who questioned her humanity. Her songs remained flawless, but something had changed. Each new lyric felt guarded, each performance more measured. The purity was still there, but now it came wrapped in armor. Because Diamond Life didn't just launch her, it tested her. It exposed not only her brilliance, but the cost of being too graceful, too private, too real for a world addicted to spectacle. But as Sade withdrew from the stage and public appearances grew rare, the world assumed she had finally found peace, until that quiet was shaken by a storm she never saw coming. Sade's sanctuary shattered. What began as a retreat with her partner, producer Bob Morgan, turned into something far more complicated. Jamaica had promised calm, a place to raise her son away from flashing cameras and noise. But one humid evening, as she was stopped by police with no clear cause, that promise crumbled. There was no explanation, only accusations, vague threats, and the unsettling demand for money. Her passport was taken, and with it, her sense of security. It wasn't just fear she carried that night, it was betrayal, a brutal reminder that not all safe havens remain safe. She left the island before sunrise, shaken and heartbroken, never to return. Back in England, what once had been sacred silence now echoed with unease. Legal trouble had followed her home. Paul Cook, once a bandmate during her early Pride days, resurfaced with a lawsuit that spanned decades. From 1995 until 2023, the case dragged through courts, its accusations pulling old dreams into sterile hearing rooms. Sade, once the voice of soul and subtlety, now stood in courtrooms where music became evidence, where harmony turned into liability. She came dressed in composure, but every appearance reopened wounds. Each claim and counterclaim reduced her early joy to lines of legalese, disputed lyrics, contested credits, forgotten sessions. And all the while, she was raising a child, her son, born in Jamaica, the very place that had both gifted and scarred her. In the quiet corners of her English home, far from the glare of public life, she sang him lullabies in the soft glow of a bedside lamp. She taught him to listen to the wind, to find calm in the soil, to trust the rhythm of stillness. While lawyers dissected her legacy, she poured her truth into whispered melodies recorded alone, demos scribbled into notebooks, voice notes captured by windows fogged with breath. Her fight wasn't just about royalties. It was about reclaiming her story, her space, and the fragile beauty of a life lived out of the spotlight. But what hidden battles reshaped Sade's soul into something even stronger? Stay glued to your screen. Her truth is just beginning. The love Sade silently protected at all costs Through the years of lawsuits and lonely nights, the question that haunted Sade most wasn't about fame or legacy. It was whether the essence of creation could ever truly be defended in court. Could a melody be measured in footnotes? Could a lyric's emotion survive being dissected by lawyers? She never found easy answers, but in the face of confusion and exhaustion, she clung to the only thing that remained unquestionably hers, her silence. She refused interviews. She didn't release statements. She kept her dignity wrapped in discretion. And, in the shelter of her home, Sade turned her focus inward, toward the one thing that mattered more than any album or award: her son, Isaac. Born during the most turbulent stretch of her life, Isaac became both her calm and her calling. While the public imagined her tucked away in countryside elegance, the truth was even more beautiful. She was singing lullabies to him on stormy nights, planting seeds together in the garden, whispering truth and courage into a boy who would one day need both. She built her world around him, not for the cameras, but for his safety. As Isaac grew, his own journey demanded even more of her love. When he came out as transgender, the world waited for a headline. But Sade gave them none. No interviews, no social media posts, no statements. Instead, she did what only a mother like her could. She showed up. In hospital rooms, in waiting lounges, in private moments where only strength could be spoken through touch. She shielded him without spectacle, held his fears without flinching, and taught him, through example, what it meant to live authentically. It was Isaac, years later, who quietly shared what she had never said. "My mom gave up everything to be there for me," he wrote, not as a PR campaign, but as a son, remembering who had stood by him the most. In that one line, the world finally glimpsed the truth behind her retreat. She hadn't disappeared. She had transformed. While others might have used a story like his to win praise or repair public image, Sade remained in the background, protecting the light around her son like a song only they could hear. Not because she was hiding, but because she knew some forms of love are too sacred to put on display. And even as her son stepped into the light of his truth, Sade continued to hold the shadows for him, steady and silent. A legacy Sade passed on to her son. There were no camera flashes in those moments, only the quiet creak of a kitchen chair as she sat alone, eyes fixed on the clock, wondering if the world would be kind to him. Fame had given her a stage, but motherhood gave her purpose. She wasn't worrying about music charts. She was praying that the world wouldn't break her son. In those late-night silences, she questioned herself. Was she protecting him enough? Was her love strong enough to hold the weight of both their fears? And yet, between those questions bloomed something deeper. Healing came not from declarations, but from small, consistent acts. Sade taught Isaac how to pull weeds from the soil, while gently explaining how pain, like thorns, could be removed with care. She sang softly as she brushed his hair, her lullabies becoming armor. Every whispered word, every mindful pause was part of a love story, unrecorded but unforgettable. The world may have mistaken her silence for absence, but Sade was never gone. She had simply stepped away from the noise, choosing stillness over spectacle, legacy over limelight. While fans waited for an album or a tour, she was raising a son, not into fame, but into integrity. Her values weren't declared in interviews or shouted from stages. They were passed down quietly, with patience, with purpose. Isaac carries that music now, not in melodies, but in the quiet strength of his presence. He is her living verse, her proof that greatness doesn't always need an audience. And Sade? She remains where she's always thrived, in the margins of fame, in the sacred spaces where love doesn't need applause to be real. She didn't return with fireworks. She came back with something stronger. But what made Sade's quiet comeback feel more powerful than a global headline? Stay tuned. This return rewrote the rules. A return without apology. It had been 10 long years. Whispers swirled that she had retired quietly, disappeared for good. But in 2010, she broke the silence with Soldier of Love. A stunning reminder that her voice hadn't aged. It had deepened. That title track wasn't just a song. It was a slow-burning declaration, pulsing with defiance and tenderness. Her voice moved like a letter sealed in heartbreak, opened again when the world most needed to feel something real. The album didn't just top charts. It stopped time. Her Grammy win that year felt less like recognition and more like a reunion. But true to form, Sade offered no interviews, no behind-the-scenes access, no explanation. And when her tour was announced, tickets vanished in hours. The crowds that filled those venues weren't chasing nostalgia. They were seeking connection. Many had grown older alongside her music, carrying her lyrics like quiet prayers through love, loss, and solitude. And then, as always, she retreated. There was no deluxe album release, no world press tour. Just one statement to explain it all. I live on my own time. Since then, she has surfaced only in soft glimpses, a song here, a whisper of studio work there. But nothing curated, nothing crafted for hype. For Sade, music was never about feeding attention. It was about truth delivered in its own rhythm. Now, far removed from the music industry's machinery, she lives in a restored farmhouse tucked within Gloucestershire's misty countryside. There are no paparazzi waiting outside, no social media trail to follow. Her world is slow, real, and rooted. Alongside her partner, Ian Watts, a former Royal Marine, and their dogs, Sade tends to her garden the way she once tended to melody, with intention and patience. Locals speak of her gently, how she walks the fields at dawn, her head tilted slightly, as if listening to the earth. In one rare moment in 2020, captured not by the press but by her goddaughter, she appeared walking hand in hand with Ian and her mother, Granny Annie. No performance, just peace. This is not withdrawal, it's preservation. Sade has chosen a life where applause no longer matters, where fame holds no weight. A life shaped not by accolades, but by stillness, soil, love, and the freedom to disappear on her own terms. But what made Sade's quiet retreat from fame spark an even louder legacy? Stay tuned. This is where it gets unforgettable. The echo that never left. In an era where overexposure is expected and noise equals relevance, Sade stood still and somehow became louder. Her music, restrained yet deeply emotional, did more than top charts. It carved out space for vulnerability and dignity. Described by The New Yorker as a grainy contralto full of air that hints at ache without spectacle, Sade's voice became a quiet rebellion against the overperformed and overproduced. It was this subtle power, this deliberate stillness, that shaped not only listeners but entire generations of artists. From Beyoncé and Alicia Keys to Frank Ocean, The Weeknd, and even heavy metal frontmen like Chino Moreno, Sade's influence ripples far beyond genre. Missy Elliott once called her smooth operator performance a favorite. Kanye West once stopped everything to blog about a new Sade album. Her artistry wasn't just timeless, it was boundaryless. Rappers like Rakim and Pusha T name her as a muse. Brandy, Aaliyah, and Talib Kweli studied her precision. Through it all, Sade never chased fame or altered her sound to suit the moment. She simply remained, elegant, unwavering, and real. Not loud, just lasting. And perhaps that's why her music doesn't age. It settles into you, gently, and stays. But what do you think made Sade's silence echo louder than the noise of an entire industry? We'd like to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that linger.